All right, Benny. Well, thanks for making the time to do this. And we can make it super clear from the get-go why you're here, why I decided to ask you to come and do a podcast together with you. Can you give us a short version for anybody who will listen to this, and who are you, and what do you actually do, and who do you do it for?
Yeah, absolutely. Happily. Well, obviously, we've linked up as working together across our CRO exchanges, which has been a nice, successful partnership. So I guess we'll start there. I'm the managing director of our CRO Exchange series, which is part of our trusty company that you can see here on my shirt, which is the Corporate Learning Network. Quick synopsis of what the CRO Exchange is we are the premier go-to SQL-driven enterprise one-to-one style meeting event. So a lot of buzzwords thrown in there, but at the end of the day, what we're doing is 3 times a year currently, likely will be more in the future. We are bringing together anywhere around 60 to 70 enterprise CROs, VPs of sales and revenue. At the end of the day, decision-making revenue leaders from a pretty strict filtered down enterprise level company sample.
Yeah, no, that's great. So it would be fair to say that you like live and breathe with sales leaders all year long, given
Yeah,
this
yeah.
unique role that you have.
Yeah, so not only do, myself and a couple other people on the team basically get on calls and go through profiling for each one of
Uh-huh.
these attendees to come to the event as they're gearing themselves up for these programs. We're also in there in the room and listening to their sessions and helping them prep for their sessions and talking about their challenges as we're at the event. So it is kind of a 365 type world that we're living in. So not a CRO myself, right? But basically, I'm very good at recognizing and seeing the patterns across the CROs and kind of what's keeping the kind of people that we are getting to attend our events up at night across honestly all different industries in the enterprise level.
Okay. And then I guess one more question on this is, coming into this opportunity earlier last year, I think there's been other vendors in the space looking to do similar things. And most people running sometimes of these events are like glorified party planners, right? And what makes CRO Exchange different? And like, why does that matter for the people in the room?
Yeah, it's a good question, and hopefully I'm pretty qualified to answer. I've probably ran every size event under the sun over the last 13 years. So, I think the key difference is everyone does something a little different. Like in the sales space, there's really no one doing what we're doing right now. And what I
Uh-huh.
would say is the key differentiator is there's pros and cons of all different types of events and engagement you can get. I would never kind of all ships rise type person. So to me, you have the well-known trade shows that are out there. I won't necessarily list through them. Everyone's been to them, right? That are sales and revenue focused. I think those are good from a marketing perspective. They're good for a branding perspective. They're good for staying, you don't want to be out of sight, out of mind mentality, right? But I think at the end of the day, what companies are often feeling is a little bit of we have to do a lot of preparation to attend these events to get the most out of them. And as a solution provider, it's tough to make impressions and actually meet the decision makers who are there. And it's equally as hard to find the ones you really want to talk to in a group of 1,000 people. So what we do is we try to filter out all of that noise. We remove the trade show element, which in my opinion is not beloved by either the vendor or the buyer. So we remove that element and we make it more intimate. We filter it down to people who actually have initiatives and projects they're trying to solve with budgets, and we're lining them up in a way that is a choose your adventure. So Alonzo, your team will not be sitting there from Aslan Training hoping the right person stumbles across your booth. They have already chosen to meet with you because they've looked at what you've done
Uh-huh.
pre-event, and you've done the same with the buyers. And that's the
Uh-huh.
key to this event is it is an SQL event, right? This is not walk out with 700 names and then put it back into your marketing engine. It's walk out of here as a solution provider. I've spoken to 15 to 25 CROs during the course of this event. I've heard their challenges they're discussing. I've met for a half hour with 7 to 10 of them and walk out of here with 7 to 15 follow-up calls with people you built, real connections with over 3 days. For the CROs who attend, it works the same way. They're able to actually network and engage with their peers who are at an equal level to them. There's no sales and revenue 101. It's all enterprise level discussions. And when someone gets on stage, you can actually ask a question and go up to them and talk to them afterwards, which, as we know, isn't the case when you're a fly in the wall in kind of a larger trade show model. So it's the best way I can kind of lay it out for you.
No, yeah, that's great. I think that's a great snapshot of kind of one of the opportunities out there for sales performance companies that are looking to bring in more conversations, high quality conversations into their pipe. Now, I want to switch to not now that we kind of summarize the opportunity
Yeah.
for sales performance companies. I want to now go to the other side, which are like the sales leaders coming into this event, right? And I thought like you would be a great person to just have a conversation about what are you hearing as you bump shoulders with all these chief sales officers and in the
Yeah.
space, what do you think has changed the most in how sales leaders think about buying over the last 12, 18 months?
Yeah, I think like a lot of it probably falls into some of the key themes that I'm kind of always harping on because I just see it repeated so often, and spoke about so often, which, um, you know, I think a lot of CROs feel right now, and they're expressing is that the structure is a little bit of a setup to fail. And what I mean by that is often they're coming in here to own all of the revenue. And that's marketing, that's sales, that's customer success, it's rev ops. But then in most organizations, two or three, or maybe all of those departments, they don't actually report to them, right? They have their own kind of head up and it's a little bit disjointed. So they're accountable for the outcomes, but they don't necessarily control all of those teams. I think the board expects the results very faster than the pipeline cycle that they've currently brought on can even really complete, right? So the average tenure, which is a pretty wild figure in software as a service, is 18 to 22 months for a CRO. And in all reality, it's just not enough time to build a machine, let alone start really seeing results. So it's just a common thing we're hearing from the CROs is a little bit of setup to fail when meeting what the expectations from the board are looking for. So I think a lot of when you mentioned what are they buying, what are they looking for, they're trying to figure out how to overcome that issue, right? And I think that's a big overarching thing is come in, tackle this huge goal of ours, but you're bringing on already inherited issues. The average time that you may even be in this position may not be enough for you to get to that point. That's a problem, right? And I think most sales and revenue leaders agree there's two ways to solve problems, right? You throw people at the problem or you throw software solutions at the problem, right?
Hmm.
And I think when they're looking at the latter, because quite frankly, the former in people, it's not going in that direction, right? Companies aren't just hiring more people. So they're looking at ways to automate. And obviously that's where the whole AI conversation and all this
Yeah,
comes into play. And when they're buying this, it has to prove to the CRO that it's going to work right now because adding another piece of that tech on that stack is not the most appealing option unless it's going to have some immediate results. So things like case studies, understanding where it's worked for similar type companies, right? These are the things that the CROs are looking for, when they're shopping.
yeah. You mentioned that these CROs are coming under a lot of pressure to get more momentum in the pipe, and you specifically said their average tenure is 12 to 18 months in software as a service. Are you seeing that across different industries? Because you guys do have attendees from other places too, right? So
We do. It's definitely a little bit longer when you get outside of the software as a service, but I think as we can all kind of agree, a lot of the software as a service companies are adapting some of these things very quickly. So I think
hmm
it's a good case study to look at, especially since, in my world, right, it's very buy sell oriented, right? Talking about what types of solutions make sense for these end users. It's oftentimes the conversation happening at the events that I'm a part of. So, we're seeing a very popular or very common theme of software as a service being very prevalent across our events, right? They're coming
yeah,
because they need to keep up. OpenAI needs to keep up with Microsoft. Google needs to keep up with Spotify, whatever it might be, right? They're all comparing and leveraging against each other when it comes to what are we doing to improve our sales and revenue and stay kind of up to date.
yeah,
But I still think a lot of these issues they're common across all the industries. Just that stat happens to, I think,
of
apply
course, yeah,
more to software as a service.
yeah. Now, in the preparation for these events to make them great, you guys want to do whatever you can possible to ensure that when you guys do have presentations during the event, that they're relevant,
Yeah.
and you also want to help the sales leaders coming in by, I'm sure there's some sort of discovery process to ensure that they meet with the right companies or help them choose the right companies or to meet
hmm
the providers. When you look at what are you hearing or seeing when you meet or your team meets with these sales leaders because you're in communication with your
Yeah.
team about this? What are they actually worried about right now the most?
Yeah. Um, I think a bit. I'll go through a couple here, and Alonso, maybe you stop me if you want to break down. But I think another one is
Top three,
for
yeah,
forecasting has broken down. CRO's job is so wired for predictability and making sure that they can keep the board and whoever they need to keep abreast, right? And that's the job. Build a machine that produces reliable numbers, right? That's what a CRO is built for. I think just right now, the environment and everything that's happening is actually working against making that possible. You have buyers are hesitating and waiting to see what's going on in the economy. There's more options in front of them. They're getting flooded with other types of things that they can be doing, right? Budgets have stretched. CFOs are now involved in every single deal that you do. pipeline is often looking full, nothing's really moving, right? And the CROs are kind of standing in front of the board, trying to call a number with confidence, and the data underneath them is kind of shifting week to week, right? And I think one of our session titles says that really well, right? It's revenue under the microscope, operating in the age of board level scrutiny, right? That's the pressure that they're living under every single day. I think it's a great session title because I think this is, you think, why would you want to take 2 to 3 days out of the office? It's like, I want to address the thing that's really driving me nuts as a CRO. And I think this is a big element of that, right? Is that we have to keep this level of transparency and forecastability, but we're not able to at the moment, right? So there are tools to help us do that, right? And that's often a thing that they'll be shopping for, which I think directly ties to your question. Another one
What is it
is,
about forecasting that is making it more difficult, you think?
yeah, I mean, once again, like I always want to be clear, right? I'm not sitting in the CRO position. I'm kind of repeating what they're saying. I think
You're the observer.
it's like I said, I think it's just, more options. And, now with the AI and the ability to have hundreds of AI-driven SDRs sending customized messages, that not used to be the case, right? So people are flooded with more information. And when you're flooded with more information, what do? You overthink things, you take more time, you don't make quick decisions, right? And I think that's, doesn't
So
necessarily help someone forecasting.
it sounds to me like what's making it hard to forecast is that we're entering a new way of doing things. So there is no previous sets of data that we can compare against to successfully be able to say, hey, we're going to be sending these many more emails because now we have AI agents doing it.
Yeah.
So as a result, we're going to get these more deals. That's kind of hard because, as you probably already know, I experienced it myself. Sometimes these AI agents don't get the outcomes
Nope.
that you want.
And Alonzo, it's changing. I think it's a good point. It is changing. So there isn't necessarily all this data, right? I know in our own business, it's a smaller scale than maybe an enterprise CRO has to deal with,
Yeah.
but we don't get any responses in emails anymore. We could triple the amount of emails. It's not going to produce the results that we want. So we're now thinking of ways. Well, we know LinkedIn is a strong outcome for us when we use emails, and we're constantly following up on LinkedIn. But let's be honest, it's limited, and LinkedIn guards their information pretty well, right? So that AI can't really crack that nut too successfully. I know some softwares out there that helps, but so where else do we turn, right? How do we get more predictable where if we hit this KPI, we can expect this level of result? And, I think even just us at a smaller scale, we struggle with that as well, right? And it's funny, as much as I've tried to convince a few sales and revenue vendors to join our events, I'm also letting them pitch me on, how they can help us with our problems as well, right? So, it's definitely, I think we're just going through a phase where all of these tools should technically help and on paper improve your outbound and your ability to be more custom and tailored to your messaging and approach companies with a tie into what you're actually doing. And it requires a lot less upfront energy. And in some cases, not even a person. But what that means is everyone has access to it, right? So then if you're the buyer, you're getting, instead of that one great message from Alonzo that is custom tailored, you're getting 400 of them. And now all of a sudden your custom tailored message is in the wash. And I think that's what's going
Information
on.
overload.
Yeah.
Information overload for the recipient. I mean, that's happening in my inbox already, which is just it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I got 7 robocalls yesterday on my phone.
Wow, that's crazy.
So everyone has access to information, and they're finding ways to get through to you, and that washes out some of the things that were actually more applicable and customized that used to be where salespeople would shine, right?
Yeah. Now I'm really curious about something because I really want you to think hard about this one because you're on LinkedIn. You follow a lot of sales leaders. They're posting things online. Is there anything that sales leaders are saying publicly on LinkedIn as you see kind of like the patterns of the content that they post versus what they say privately in these events?
So I actually, when I was thinking about what would be helpful to talk about, I was mostly kind of thinking more of the privately might be a stretch, but maybe just more openly at the event, right? Where they're in their own kind of private
But they feel
circle.
more safe, right? It's not in LinkedIn.
First
right?
posting. I think the LinkedIn things are very motivational and what if and what could we do, right? It's very like, look at with this we can accomplish this, right? And then we get together with everybody in kind of the Boys and Girls Club with the sales and revenue leaders. Yeah, it becomes a little bit more like the water cooler talk about the boss and what's going wrong, right? So I think like some other things I mentioned, the forecasting I think is a real prevalent thing. Maybe some more, not LinkedIn appropriate, right? Content would be, I think alignment's still not solved, right? Which is a tale as old as time. Sales and marketing are just still not aligned. And I think that's almost a laughing stock of a topic at this point, but you don't see it on LinkedIn because I think it's become a little bit of like a cliche. It's still an issue. And I think as we're addressing with more AI coming involved, it's becoming more of an issue, right? Because of like what I just said. What now is how are you differentiating your marketing versus your sales outbound with AI? Like, are they starting to mesh more, or do they becoming more separated? I think that's being explored more and being talked about at the event, where maybe that was a little bit dulled down a bit, and now it's starting to come up again a little bit louder, is like the lack of alignment between sales and marketing, especially with adding in a lot of these tools. I think is a big one that replies to what you're asking.
Yeah,
You're not
let's
going to
double
see
click.
that post
Yeah,
on LinkedIn often.
yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, because obviously the marketing team is also looking at their posts, right? But
Yeah.
let's double click on that. Like, let's articulate what does that mean at a very tactical level when they say like, hey, like marketing is doing its own thing and sales is doing is other. Is it my impression is that the sales team is saying one thing to the buyer, and then marketing is promoting a different message to the buyer. Is that what you mean when you say that they're not
I
aligned, or
think at
what are
times
other examples that you
I
think
think there's
are?
also customer success mixed in there, right, Alonso? Like,
Uh huh.
and they're so it's just you have these for enterprise companies, these are massive self-guiding units, right? With multiple line managers and a lot
Yep.
of people involved.
Correct.
So if they're not aligned, then the whole message is being skewed, stretched, right? And it's pretty important for that those three functions at least. There's probably more for some organizations to be aligned, right? Pre-sales, sales, marketing, customer success. And I think as they continue to stay farther aligned, what that does is it just, it kind of silos each one. And that's what causes bleeding pipelines, right? It's what then leads to the lack of the ability to forecast properly, right? Because how can you forecast properly if you as a CRO who technically oversees all these functions has trouble with the communication between marketing and sales and customer? It makes everything more difficult. And I think ties into every little piece that we've already pulled on string wise.
Is it that they don't have the time? Like, are they basically are they taking on more than they can, and then basically it becomes like a fake leadership role as it relates to managing marketing and customer success when everybody lives under the CRO?
So
Because
once
if
again,
you if you're
going to more
yeah
the what they say in private conversation is, I think the CRO is given this lofty title with this massively lofty responsibility of overseeing all the revenue functions. But I don't know what company you've ever came into or worked for or talked to where they didn't have a CMO or a VP of marketing who
of
also
course
felt like their job and responsibility was to oversee all of marketing. And then
yeah
wherever, you can apply that to every other team, right? So if one person is up here and that person's are supposed to report in, but that person has such a major job because historically, and how we always look at it, marketing is its own functioning entity,
yes
but under this world and really how it needs to be, and it has definitely shifted toward, right? The CRO title is the CMO and the CRO either need to be in lockstep, which historically has not been something that has been, always the case, right? Or there needs to be a proper hierarchy because the CRO is the one reporting to the board on things like forecasts and
yeah
predictability and where they're going to
yeah
be
because
and their
that's the
strategies. And
numbers.
marketing is a massive part of that. So if they're not in lockstep or there's not a proper reporting structure, once again, given some of these timelines these CROs come in with and what they're handed, it's very difficult, right? It's not like every time a CRO joins an organization, they wipe out all the heads of marketing and bring in who they want, right? So they're working with people who have been here and done things a certain way for a period of time. Sometimes it's not easier to uproot that, right? So, these are the things you'll hear in the whispers, around the lunch
Yeah.
tables, right? So,
Yeah, which makes sense why marketing teams are now being pushed into reporting on generated pipe versus all the other
correct.
typical traditional
Correct.
marketing metrics that don't really mean anything to a board who's looking to assess the health of the
Yeah.
business with numbers.
And for me, Alonzo, like, like yourself, I'm actually most of the time
Yeah,
when I'm not at the event talking to marketing, right? For some of these software companies as my
yeah,
POC, right?
yeah,
And it's been fascinating to hear how much that has potentially shifted on how they view events, right? Like they're asking much more pipeline driven MQL versus SQL like type questions for the events than really ever before because it's probably being expected upon them to do so, right? Which I think is a shift and it has to do with everything we're talking about.
yeah. That's actually interesting. So for what you guys offer, which is this like matchmaking with executives for basically meetings, set
Yeah.
meetings, qualified meetings. Do you? I know you pretty much will reach out to whoever you think may be interested. Is that both marketing and sales when you
Yeah, there's two sides of the fence, right, Alonzo? Just as a recap, right? We're bringing in a bunch of revenue leaders to these events, right? They're
yeah
qualified, et cetera. So it's obvious that's who that title is. I have a team that reports into us that basically will go out and find these qualified prospects who want to be a part of this conversation and have
yep
projects and are actually interested in meeting with vendors. That's group A, right? part of that group A is also going to be some of our thought leaders who get up on the stage and talk about the journeys that they've went on. Group B is the solution providers like Aslan Training, right? So you guys are obviously want to get into that room because you have solutions for those executives, right? So you're going to be in that room. When I talk to the group B, which is, how we run these events in full disclosure, right? So when I talk to group B, I'm typically the POC will be within marketing. It'll be a C-suite executive for a smaller company. We have some up and coming, vendors at our company or at our events who don't have a full marketing team built out, but a great product. So maybe it's their owner,
Yeah.
or it'll be a high level sales, like a CRO for the vendor,
Yeah.
or et cetera. So,
Okay. All right. So let's now double click on these meetings, like the magic of matchmaking, right? Because it sounds like I wouldn't call it a speed dating because they're like, think 45 minutes long. It's not like,
yeah,
the 10-second
30-minute
thing.
meetings. Yep.
30-minute meeting. What do you think makes a sales leader say yes to a meeting at CRO Exchange?
Yeah. So we really, I think, adopted and evolved this for a long time, especially over my tenure, which, is, like I said, pushing over 10 years for the organization. So for one, we do a very thorough job of profiling every delegate. Okay. And when I say delegate, I mean practitioner, right? I'm talking the revenue leaders. Okay. So we are having them fill this out on their own and take a first pass at it. And then they typically are always getting on a call with myself and we'll walk through it together. Okay. I do this for two reasons. One, because I think it allows, well, let's be honest, sometimes people can treat it like a homework assignment, right? And that's not the purpose of this. So I get on to make sure they understand why we're asking these questions and where it's going to help. And these questions cover things, right? Like, what's your current tech stack? What's your objectives? What is your challenges that you've had, right? When it comes to bringing on new
Yeah,
solutions,
it's a discovery. It's a discovery
it's a
process.
full discovery.
But
What are your barriers?
that's a huge ask for a sales leader, right? Like if you think about, I mean, in some ways, that is a sales engine within CRO Exchange, just to even get the sales leaders to come to the event. How did you guys get to a place where now you have built enough fire to reach out to these sales leaders, and then that they say, okay, sure, I'll answer all your questions,
Yeah.
right? It's a big ask.
It's the value proposition for them, right, Lonzo? Like whenever I talk to the vendors, right, who are going to be spending some money to get in this room, they ask me, what's in it for the buyers? Like, why do the revenue leaders want to come to this event? What's the point? It's pretty simple, right? If you put yourself in their shoes and how do you learn, right? You can be a self-learner and sit behind your computer and pick things up. But I think in this day and age, especially we're all remote and hybrid, conferences have become invaluable, right? I mean, you have to get and shake hands and meet people
Community.
and have that social interaction and be part of your network. It's become more important now that most people are working remote. So for them, it's like, okay, now I know I need to do conferences. I know I need to be engaging, right? I know I need to be learning, maybe even representing myself and getting up on stage and building my own personal brand, right? A little bit of all of these things. How can I do that, right? And you look across the gambit of your options, okay? And we alluded to this a little bit earlier. Option A is walking around and being really a cog in a wheel and a fly on the wall at a larger event where, yeah, you probably get to find some people and some friendlies that you know. As you mentioned, probably a good party somewhere, right? It's probably a good social interaction. You can kind of see a lot of things for short periods of time. I'm sure you can watch a bunch of demos on the trade show floor, maybe hear a really good keynote that you sit in the back and take some notes on. All of that's good. And especially if it's in your city or, hey, it's the company wants you to go, maybe you take a couple days, whatever. Our event for CRO who actually has problems to tackle, you're going to have the ability to basically ask questions and talk to every single speaker after their session. You're going to be able to see what peers are there pre-event and be able to get the time to have a coffee and sit down with them. And you're going to rub shoulders with those people for probably 6 to 10 other times during each day of the conference. So if you're really coming to network and engage and you care about being in a room with actual senior level peers at a trade show, Alonzo, anyone can buy. I get to go to the trade show. They don't want to talk to me, right? So if you want to be really paying attention to, hey, everybody I talk to is going to be at my expectation. And then on top of that, like you mentioned, they have to look into the solutions. Would you rather choose which solutions you want to look into and be able to basically ignore the rest? Or would you rather have to basically needle in a haystack, walk around a trade show floor and do a bunch of demos? Right? Usually everything I mentioned, they prefer that model. So that's how we're able to get them. It's the model we've built. It's the value proposition of the events. And then, our brand is strong, right? The Corporate Learning Network's been around for a long time. We have a very successful Chief Learning Officer Exchange series that people are very familiar with. So I think you guys even kind of came from that series ways as well. And a lot of the other sales training providers we work with did as well. So it was very easy for us to build the CRO Exchange off of the already successful, learning and development event series that we run.
Yeah. No, I'm super curious about something. Okay, so you're in a position right now where you're joining a company that's been for it's been around for a long time. So you're able to flex the fact that the previous year we had this many sales leaders show up, and we have you already have a model built. Have you ever
Yeah.
bothered to ask someone inside of the corporate learning network how did they even build the fire for that first event ever, where you're reaching out to the CLO or the CRO, but like you haven't done it before? How do you, and obviously
So
you still
I
have a
know that
model,
so I'll say this, our owners are still our owners, so we could probably ask them.
but you don't know.
So I don't know if I've ever asked that question specifically, but I will say this is we started at we didn't start with running the exchange style events, right? So that was an adapted model from conferences where we would have, a couple booths, sessions, etc. But the one-to-one meeting model was something that adapted over time. I can answer that. I know
Got it, got it.
because we did not run these exchange events as often and as prevalently and as popular as they are when I first started. I think it's about 13 or 14 years ago with the parent company of Corporate Learning Network that's called IQPC.
Okay, let's go back to the buyer behavior. The sales leaders
Yeah.
coming into this event who they are aware that they're going to be meeting with a vendor at some point during the event. That's part of the package for them. What makes them ignore a vendor completely?
So I think for one, vendors that work in more incumbent markets, right? If somebody has something in place, then it's probably a bit more natural for them to maybe look otherwise. Things like CRMs, right? If you're a CRM, I think this applies even more to email marketing, right? But at least the event, you can actually get a really quick sense by our filtering of our profiles of who actually could be shopping for new CRMs, right? But a bit more of an incumbent solution, right? Where opposed to a sales training where you could always do more training, right? So I think, just what kind of solution it is in general. I think the networks that same logic applies to like the huge AI, right? How many different AI companies are going to talk to? Because I think a lot of CROs right now feel like we already have too much AI that we don't know how to use well. So adding more doesn't necessarily make sense. So I think this is very much dependent on where they are in their journey and what they're looking at, and honestly, what the demands of the board are. Right? I've heard a lot of
Yeah,
CROs say from the board, we need to know yesterday what our AI strategy is. Right. And
yeah.
that's a thing, something that CROs are really battling. So I think for vendors, it's really important to be able to be out in this market saying, hey, we're either AI native or we're not, or this is how we're able to provide the change management necessary to make this AI work. Right. I think this is such a huge thing is
Yeah, so
they
really
have
be
this
on top.
flashy tool, but
Yeah,
how do they make it
yeah.
work and how do they get everyone to adapt and actually work through that change management?
Yeah. So basically, be really aware of what are like the biggest pain points right now pressuring their ICPs, so that when the sales leader comes in, the
Yeah.
provider needs to be able to align their solution to what they're being pressured to solve for, right?
Yeah,
So,
I think it's inherently so important right now, and I think that and I'll mention this because I know you guys dabble on both sides, and I think there's a lot of solution providers who are looking at this, and some who are
and this is
blowing by
just
it.
for
But
for the record. This is just in general sales performance companies. We don't want to make it about any specific.
correct,
Uh,
yeah. So what I'm getting at is I think this also comes big time from CROs. Alonzo
yeah,
is the human side of AI is what's keeping them up at night. Right. And I think it's
yeah,
really interesting. So just talking about the sales leaders is that you mentioned what makes some of them choose a company or not. Right. And I think part of it is, what surprises me at the events is how often these AI conversations in our room turn into people conversations. Right. The sales reps don't know what their job looks like in 3 years. Right. The uncertainty affects their morale. It affects recruiting, retention. Actually, one of our Pizza Hut delegates in our Miami event literally said it best. He said, in the age of AI, we've got reinforced how important it is to stay focused on the human aspect. Skills, leadership development, the tools change, the people's challenge doesn't go away, right? And I think that's a huge, like, powerful line that's very much across the board at our events is tools are coming, companies are going to have them. Some will do it better, some will get there first, it'll change, they'll adapt. But I think the solution providers who are addressing the human side of this to the CROs are the ones that seem to be getting ahead.
Now, in your opinion, when people are the sales leaders are jumping in these meetings that are scheduled for them while they're attending the event, when they walk into these meetings, what do you think they're hoping to get out of it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think there's just a straight up information gathering opportunity here. I mean,
Hmm.
once again, we just talked about how difficult it is to get email responses. That's not because they're reading your entire email and saying this sounds super interesting. I just not going to reply, right?
Hmm.
It's not getting seen, right? Your value proposition is not getting seen. So for the buyer, they're somewhat informed on what's out there, maybe by really strong marketing or word of mouth. So this is our opportunity to give a solution provider a half hour to say, hey, this is what we're doing. What's your issues right now? Okay, well, we've helped Coca-Cola do that. Right. Let me tell you how. Right. And this is how we could potentially do it. And, in this format, it's done in a very kind of open forum networking way versus a demo way. And I think that's what the CROs prefer is they want to have a consultative conversation. They don't want
Yeah.
to just see your product. Right.
Yeah.
That's not their interest right now. It's they want to talk about, hey, here's my goal. Right. Does what you guys do help that? Yeah. Let me show you how we've done it for someone else. Right. To me, that's a productive conversation and the ones that I think we build the atmosphere to be conducive at our events.
Yeah. Looking to make the most of the opportunity to seek clarity, right? So,
Correct. Yeah. But I
okay.
think that's the biggest thing when you ask and then listen, what they're trying to get out of it is trying to solve the problems, the ones, right? So if they find someone who's going to help them solve it, right? These companies have budget. I mean, I can tell you right now, the average listed budget for our CROs for solutions is more than 500,000, right? Across the executives here. So there is no lack of, money that will be invested if the right solution crosses their desk to overcome these mammoth challenges that they're having and will continue to have because the board's not going to let go, right? So they're going to keep pressuring. And as a CRO, you're going to have to keep delivering and answering. And like I said, if the board is shutting down, adding more people, then the next thing is typically solutions and software, right? And training and consultations and consultants, et cetera, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, even if they have the budget, they still want to make sure that the budget produces the outcomes that the board is expecting them to produce. So there's always the risk of investing the budget wrongly, right? So
correct. And that's
they have to mitigate risk.
another reason why this model is favorable to them because it's hard to come to that conclusion in a quick 5-minute demo. And then in this world, you get your 5-minute demo. Maybe he gets a business card or she gets a business card. You come back to the office and then you're back to remote interaction. You're doing a demo over the screen. Where in this model, you're going to get a half hour to sit down and talk with each other uninterrupted in a closed door room. And then you're going to be with each other for 3 days. So it allows you gain a little trust, right? Build a relationship and a rapport, actually understand what each other are looking for and doing. So, that's once again, it's another reason why we build the environment the way we do.
You
And I
know,
think it's the direction sales, in my opinion, is going to continue to go, right? I think that we're going to
yeah,
see AI and we're going to get to this point where there's so much noise. There's so much noise. Yeah, we can try to tweak what the noise looks like,
you're gonna
but at
shut
the
it
end of the
down.
day, you got to cut through the noise, and that's meeting in person. And that's not just going to be our conference, right? I think it's just
Yeah.
getting up and going to other cities and meeting people and sitting down and talking because I think it's going to feel so refreshing and it's going to be the only way to really, once again, cut through what is going to be so crowded, already is so crowded in every B2B sector right now.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, at the end, people want to feel confident about how they're gonna solve the problems that they're being hired to solve, and that requires trust. And the best way to transfer trust is through these types of conversations, and not, being bombarded with all these messages over time and from
Yeah, I
different
mean,
companies.
and
It,
I
it
think
makes
that goes
sense.
it goes both ways, Alonzo, right? Like when I look at events, you have buyers and
Yep.
sellers, or you have practitioners. We can use interchangeable words, but to me, it's on both sides. I want to be able to be in a room where I'm going to actually meet people, not pass by people. I want to be in a room where I can understand what people are doing and follow up, not make my own conclusions based on just hearing something, right? And then from a seller perspective, any solution provider who participates in our CRO exchange is for them is, I think it's easy, right? If you're a seller, I want ability to bump shoulders with the Alonzo 5 or 6 times during the event. I want to be able to get a coffee,
Yeah.
maybe a beer afterwards. I want to eat lunch together, right? I will have our half-hour meeting where I'll learn about what you're doing, but I want the other opportunity to ask where you live and what your interests are, right? So then when we have our follow-up call after the event, it would be crazy for you to not give me another half hour of my time. Now we've built a relationship. We can maybe then talk a little bit more, black and white work stuff and see if there's a way to work together. Like I think that's always been the key to a good salesperson and a good buy sell relationship. But I just think with all the issues you and I even talked about for our own businesses and what we're seeing the CROs complain about with
Yep.
noise and marketing. It's just, I think I heard Mark Cuban talking about it recently, how conferences are going to become more and more popular, right? As this continues to go down this path, right? It's going to be is sales teams with massive AI driven SDR, robo, right, pushing departments. And then I think you're going to have AEs who can run master classes in in-person sales, right? To me, that is going to be a really important thing as we continue to move forward. And not for every industry, but I think software as a service for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The other thing is, so let's just take a snapshot of the past 2 years of all the events that you've observed as part of being part of the corporate learning network. Has there been a vendor that really stood out for you and that they're just making the most of the opportunity of, meeting with these executives and participating in this type of events? And if somebody comes to mind that really impressed you as on how they're contributing to these events, what are they doing differently?
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to a new company out of San Francisco who
Uh-huh.
does some AI role playing by the name of Hyperbound.
Uh-huh.
And AI native, and basically got around to funding I think last year, and immediately signed on for all of our events and just took a major swing with us. They did everything right at the event, and I think they're also doing everything right. I see them all over LinkedIn nonstop, constant interaction. They are tagging people, and I'm not talking just their salespeople. Their CEO is constantly interacting, right? So you really feel a personal effect with them. And at the event, they book a dinner. They make sure they're getting 10 to 12 people out. They're obviously not being aggressive to an extent of being too pushy, but understanding that this is a buy sell event. So let's get together. Let's have relationship building, branding, tchotchkes. They're being smart about what they're doing. It's not garbage. Like, I think these are the things that from an events perspective, I could probably go on forever, but I think it's a little bigger than that. For a company that had one marketer, they're doing more than what I see companies with a team of 20 marketers at times. And I don't think that's just because they're working way harder, right? I think it's a strategic approach. And whenever for our events, Alonzo, and you know this, I'll meet with whoever the solution providers send me on site, and I'll walk through a full 3-day layout of, hey, this is what I would do. Here's the motions I would make. This is what I recommend. This is what the delegates tell us about their feedback and how the meetings are going and the sessions. Take it for what you will, right? So, I kind of coach everybody and I don't hold back to anyone individually. And then it's just up to the solution providers to take advantage of that. And
Yeah.
I always say it's a low lift event for the output you can get. Because if you go to a trade show, you have to have the shiniest booth and the best toys
Yeah.
and the loudest noise, and then maybe you'll get people who walk by. They will come to you. It's set up. You'll have meetings, guaranteed. And if you just work the room as a social person for the 3 days, you're going to build some relationships and you're going to get people to pick up your follow-up calls. But then what are you going to take over the edge? Are you going to sit there, take your 10 meetings and maybe meet 5 or extra people? Or are you going to get your 10 guaranteed meetings and then you're going to work the rest of the room over the 3 days and walk out of here with, 25, 30 connections with all the people you wanted to talk to? Because the latter is completely possible, but the
Yeah.
ball's in your court.
So what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that what stood out of this company is that they're sending more people than the usual vendor, right, to work the room.
No, no, not more people. No, just same thing. They'll send 2 to 3 people to the event.
Two
It's
to
not
three
more
people.
people at all. It's
Okay.
just they're just everywhere. Like, they're in every room. They don't skip a session, right? They're
So they're
they're
really,
constantly
yeah,
they're
they're
just
completely
they're more
fully
present.
participating in
Yeah,
the whole event, not just going for the meetings and then skipping some of the other
correct.
things going on around. Is
And
that
there's
right?
and there's a lot of vendors who do this. So it's really actually not to discredit anyone. Some solution providers are really good at this in general, and some marketing teams are brilliant at it. But I think, when there's a CEO who attends, and in my opinion, this is an event where you do send your CEO or CRO. It's that type of seniority level program. Having them be an active participant really is strong for the brand, right? And I
Okay.
think there's an obvious respect to higher seniority titles as you go to these events. You are pitching VP and C-suite executives, right? So sometimes it's better to send someone who's also a C-suite executive than maybe an account executive, right? And I,
Yeah.
I, I warn and I tell vendors of that is this is an event where people send their VP and C-suite level
No, which makes
executives or,
sense.
or
Yeah.
sellers.
But you don't
Yep.
have the CEOs taking the meetings themselves.
No, but
for?
they'll sometimes sit in them, just to be in it and listen.
Oh,
But yeah, they'll
okay,
usually not be the ones who are constantly taking every meeting. They'll be
makes
more of the
sense.
speaker who gets on stage, walks the floor, asks questions. And I think it's maybe the VP of sales who's running the meetings will come
Yeah,
introduce them at some point, right? Yep.
I love that. Okay, okay.
Just a polished approach, and then like think about the LinkedIn activity of the CEO of, this vendor company, and I'll use Hyperbound as example. Their CEO, Sai, he's fantastic about posting after the event about the event and everything that happened during the event and who they met, and he tags everybody, and that's the CEO of the company, right? So compare that approach to someone who didn't post anything on LinkedIn after the event, right? There's a big difference there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, I think that's all I wanted to cover for today, Vinny.
Awesome.
This was super insightful. I think you're in a very unique position where you're an observer. I had a conversation the other day, which is, why I was excited to talk to you is you want to see the story from different angles, right? Like there is an angle from the CRO perspective, but there is an angle from the person observing the CRO, and I think that's your angle where you're in this very unique position where not only you're selling yourself, but you are surrounded and hearing and what's going on in the space as
Yeah.
we continue to figure out how to improve sales performance.
No, I'm
Thanks
happy. I'm
again.
happy. I'm happy
Yeah.
you had me on, Alonso. And like, for me is I could probably go on and on about more patterns and things I'm seeing from the sales and
Yes.
revenue leaders. So, but obviously for me is let's talk about it in person, right? Come out to the events and like, be a part of those groups and be together. We do New York, we do San Francisco, we do Miami, right? So it's pretty popular cities, and this is where these conversations are happening, right? And once again, I'm not a CRO, so none of that was made up from my own challenges. This
Yeah.
is these are what's being talked about in the rooms. It's what I talk about when people are filling out their profiles, and this we make an environment that allows people to put their guard down for 3 days, right? Instead of walking a trade show where your guard's up, right? Because you're being kind of sharks and minnows and sold all the time. I think this is what we shoot for is, hey, this is an open conversation. It's consultative. It's intimate, right? And we do it, multiple times a year so that we don't have to just have one huge event once a year in order to continue going, right? We want to get different groups of people at each one of these all the time. So
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's more organized, and basically it's a great way to manage information overload that happens
yeah.
not only digitally but also in some of these events with the booth. No, that makes sense. Okay. All right. Thank you, Vinny.